The economy is always listed as the most important subject for many voters. If you were in Congress, what would you do to try to improve the economy, and what could you do as a congressional representative to ensure that people in the first district have access to plentiful, good-paying jobs?
Yeah. Well, Jeff, obviously in Tennessee we've been very successful. We're the envy of the nation right now. We're number one in just about everything you can think of. We're, you know, fiscal management, best business climate, great rainy day funds, AAA bond rated, balanced budgets. We do it right. And so I think that those principles need to be taken to D.C. That's what I would do. I was very pleased and proud to get the National Federation of Independent Business Award this year for taking care of our small businesses for the past 5 years. I think they calculated the last 5 years of my activity, you know, for that. So I was really proud of that because small business is the backbone of our economy. And so I would certainly take those principles that we've used here that I just mentioned to D.C. and make sure that we've got to try to pass a balanced budget amendment. You know, we have to. I think President Trump did the right thing in lowering taxes, because when he did that, the economy just boomed. So we're going to have to work on those same principles up in D.C. and I think what you're going to see is a reboot of the economy big time if we do that.
What's the best way legislatively to prevent gun violence, and specifically school shootings and mass shootings?
I think education, for one. We have to be very upfront in trying to figure out who should be obtaining weapons and who shouldn't. I know we have a great database now. One of the things that I did in the Tennessee Senate, and these kinds of things need to be done at the federal level as well, I found that if someone's deemed by a judge to be a danger to himself or others mentally, then our mental hospitals are making note of that, and they are referring that to law enforcement, so the database reflects that when you try to purchase a weapon. What I found was we weren't doing that when people are adjudicated in that way to our psych wards and hospitals around the state. So 40–50% of the people that were in that situation weren't. We've got to be, and so I passed legislation to make sure that that was the case, that those will all be noted, so that when you try to purchase a weapon, we know you're not a mental problem and a danger to yourself or others. Those kind of things have to take place, I think. We just have to be very aware. There's a balance, but there's a critical balance between I guess the information that's allowed to be made public for databases and other uses, HIPAA, those sorts of things from a health perspective, and that balance of health and safety for the public. So I think there needs to be a lot more work done up in D.C. relative to, you know, how we know who should be gaining weapons and who shouldn't. But obviously, you know, the Second Amendment's very important, and our Constitution is very clear. You know, it shall not be infringed. But I think we have to make sure that we have a situation wherein we know who's getting weapons and who's not getting weapons.
What is your plan for fixing America's immigration problem?
Well, yeah, immigration, I've always thought this. When so many people work so hard to become citizens, Jeff, and they go through the process properly, it's not right for us to allow those who would break the rules to do so. I think we have to enforce our laws. We haven't been doing that. I think we have to make sure that our borders are very secure, either virtually or physically. And I think we're going to have to really be honest with ourselves and take a good common sense approach at how do we deal with the people that are here now that have come illegally, and many who have children who are in our schools, you know, graduating from Science Hill and Dobbin's Minute and Boone's Creek as valedictorians and those sorts of things. How do we deal with that? But at the same time, you know, draw that line and say, I'm sorry, from here on, this is what we're doing. So it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of, I think, getting together both sides of the aisle to figure that out. And at this point, I can tell you, there's not a whole lot of diplomacy in Congress. It's very polarized. Those on the left side that would want, that are more center, that would want to work with those on the right side, are not going to do it because, you know, Pelosi has the group that's in charge controlling the situation, and it's just not, right now is not a good time. So we're going to have to figure out how to get people together to work on this problem, because it has to be done, and I look forward to getting up there and being a part of that.
How important is it to not increase the national debt and to balance the annual federal budget?
Very important. You know, we're over $25 trillion. I mean, think about that. You know, it's amazing how quickly budgets grow. When I went to Nashville, first went to Nashville, the budget was around $10 billion. Now it's about $40 billion. And in Tennessee, we have done what we should have done. In Tennessee, we have cut, we have spent, not spent what we don't have. You know, we're the best fiscal state in the nation. So if we've grown like that, think about the growth at the federal level, how out of control that is. You know, it's crazy. We've got to do the balanced budget amendment, and I think what's very important is we're going to have to make sure that in Washington, our federal government does what we've done in Tennessee, and that is take each department and make sure that they know that they have to be responsible and accountable. That's not being done now. You know, in Tennessee, when the governor comes on board each year, he sends a message to the Department of Education. You know, I want to see you cut 5% from your budget this year. Tell me where there's waste, where there's fraud, where there's abuse. We do that every year. The federal government doesn't do that. We're going to have to start doing that. But the balanced budget amendment is so important, and that's going to be a priority of mine as well.
What, if anything, do you think President Trump could have done better in his handling of COVID-19?
I think he's done a very good, very responsible job. I mean, obviously, the first thing he did, Jeff, was to put in place that level 4 travel restriction. Had he not done that, we would have been in deep trouble. I mean, you look at the situation we have now and the numbers. He stopped that travel very quickly, and then thank goodness our governor put that, put on our emergency situation very quickly. He put that in place. And so I think Trump's done a good job. I really do. It's so hard. What he's trying to do is balance our personal freedoms with health care. That's a tough balance. As chairman of the Health Committee in Tennessee, I can tell you that's a tough balance. And I get the calls every day. Rusty, do we have to wear the mask? What are we going to do if they try to make our college student take the new shot, the new vaccine for COVID? We don't want government controlling our bodies. And so that's a tough balance. But I think he's done a good job. Obviously, we can always do better. But I think he's really tried and made the effort to do this right. And I have to say how proud I am of our nation and our state for coming through like they have for the people that are affected by this. I've spent most of my time in the last 2 or 3 months not doing what I need to do to win a congressional seat. I've been taking most of my time working to try to help people through this COVID situation with unemployment and small business loans and losing their houses and those kinds of things. So if it weren't for the assistance that the federal government had given us and the state, I don't know what our people would have done. So I'm very proud and thankful to both the state and our nation for doing what they've done, Jeff.
Do you believe climate change is real? And if so, what do you think is the best approach to combat it?
I think that part of what the left believes, some of that is possibly the case. Obviously, this world is a lot different than it was years ago with the automobiles and the emissions and the, all of the things that are taking place. This country's been so good to try to balance the industry with environment. But the other countries have not. I mean, you can go to countries in this world where you can't walk down the street and see somebody on the other side of the street. The smog is so bad. You know, the environment is so awful. I think there's truth on both sides of the aisle on this issue. Obviously, we need to do as much as we can to mitigate the effects of all that we do in this world to survive from an energy perspective. At the same time, I think that most of what we're seeing is a cycle, a natural cycle that's taken place for millions of years, and you can go back and look at all the different layers of ice and layers of this earth and see that that's the case. So I don't think the climate change that the left speaks about is valid. I think there is a lot that we can do, however, to mitigate the problem that we're seeing. But I think it's mostly that natural, normal cycle that God has put in place for this world.
If elected to Congress, what would you do to address the racial tension that's evident in the protests that have recently been taking place, and how would you try to improve race relations in the 1st District?
Well, it's a real difficult situation that we're in. I think first and foremost, we have the ability to speak and speak freely, and our First Amendment rights are very important. You know, my Uncle Dewey, whom I'm named after, gave his life over Kiska Island in a P-38. My dad flew 31 missions over Europe, and I served in almost 4 years in the Vietnam War. And many of my friends died in Vietnam so that we could have that right. And so it's very important that we understand that people who want to speak out against our government, against our flag, against the situations that they feel are oppressive to them is important. But we can't solve the problem if we don't talk and listen, and without that true calm dialogue, you know, we're not going to be able to solve this problem. But we cannot tolerate violence and discord. So I think it's going to take calming. It's going to take a lot of listening, a lot of discussion. But as the congressman, I would not tolerate violence and discord. What we see in the streets today, if you think about it, you know, peaceful protest is great, and that's what this country's all about. But when you have people that are destroying businesses and looting that citizens have built their entire lives on, destroying those businesses that people, you know, rely on for their families and for their communities and neighborhoods, that's wrong, and we can't tolerate that. So there's a balance there. We have to be, you know, very cognizant that education is important in this issue. Our police, our law enforcement, our social norms, all those things have to be taken to accord and properly balanced. But at the same time, there's a line you don't cross, and I would not allow that to happen from a violence and discord perspective.
Do you support a regional economic development effort that could involve merging economic development entities like networks in Sullivan County and NetRep in this area, and also chambers of commerce potentially? And if so, what role should a congressperson take in that?
Yeah, no, I think that's very important, Jeff. You know, the UT Boyd report came out a couple of years ago, and it was very interesting. It essentially said that those areas, those metropolitan areas of our state, are going to see a great deal of growth, but those urban and rural areas that are not metropolitan in nature are going to see very slow growth. And so I've told our chambers of commerce and our economic groups that I think we need to operate from now on like we did with the aerospace park. You know, come together. That was an amazing project. I mean, you know, in Nashville, we sat around the governor's table with Kingsport, Bristol, Johnson City, you know, all of us together. And you know, when you might in the past have seen that competition, that fight between, we were all together on this. And so I think that we've got to be more We've got to think more from a regional perspective. Obviously, it's also our responsibility to take care of each of our districts as well. But I think you can do both, and you can balance that. The MSA situation needs to come together. You know, before we were one metropolitan statistical area, and now we're really two. We're parallel areas. That needs to come back together, I think. So the OMB in DC needs to work on that for us. I think we'd get a lot more activity from an industrial and business perspective if we would. But I'll tell you one thing, the chambers of commerce are strong, and they need to be strong for us. It's kind of like the Farm Bureau for agriculture. You know, we've got to keep those strong because they're the ones that really help control all of that and send the message, you know, to those in Washington, not just the legislators, but those that are working, you know, with organizations like the OMB and others, to get that, send that message that that's what we want. We want back together as an MSA.
Is there any approach that the president has taken to his job that you would have done differently?
Probably, I think you know, many people have a problem with his tweeting. I think that's one of the situations that comes up most when people talk about President Trump. He, I think, felt that he had to do that, though, because obviously the media in this country, and when I say media, I don't talk about our local medias are very fair, and they're very balanced. They really are. But the national media that you see on channel, you know, on the 6:30 news, Channel 5, Channel 11, and CNN, and even now somewhat the Fox News, they're all moving more toward, I guess, less toward journalism and more toward ideology and those sorts of approaches. And so I think he saw this and realized he wouldn't get a fair shot, you know, in that national arena unless he did tweet like he does. And so that's how he gets his message out there. But that's what I hear most, I think. But I think I have found this, and I like this. He has become, I guess, more faith-based as time has gone on. All his speeches contain more of that now. How we have to rely on our faith. How do we have to rely on our God and our country. Our country's founders, you know, thought that was a very important part of our society. And I think a lot of the things we're seeing today is because we've moved away from that family, that faith and family. In Tennessee is, I've worked for years from Ned McWhirter to Bill Lee, and the values and principles I've used are you know, lower taxes, less government intervention, personal responsibility, faith, and family. Trump has used those. That's why he's been able to get what he's gotten done without going through Congress. Congress hasn't helped him at all in these things. I mean, think about it. He's got he now has, in the eyes of the world, respect back for our country. He had the economy booming again. He kept the promise and put our embassy back in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. I mean, every time you turn around, he's done peace through strength. You don't see ISIS anymore on the front page. You know, when he says don't cross that line, you don't cross that line. And the Middle Eastern Arabs, that's what they respect. That's all they respect. I lived with them when I was young. My dad was building runways in North Africa, and the Arabs were part of our lives. And so I think you know, it's his personality is offensive to some, but he's a New York businessman, and I think that he was put in this situation at a perfect time for us, because we needed that kind of personality to deal with all the different elements that are coming in to try to change this country. We're literally in a war of America versus socialism. So I think it's he's doing what he needs to do at this point.
All right, we're to the last question. This is a moment for you to speak to the voters about what makes you the best person to represent them.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously I don't talk about myself a whole lot, but I've spent many years now in the Tennessee Senate. Jimmy Quillen got me started. He and Ralph Cole got me started years ago, and Jimmy taught me, he said, the first thing he said is, Rusty, you treat the people you serve like your family, and you'll do well. And like he always said, keep your door open. And so I've always made sure that my office in Nashville was the top office for constituent services. Jeff, I was the first senator in the history of our state to put in a toll-free line in my Senate office in Nashville, so that my constituents could call and not have to. That was before cell phones, and not have to pay. And so I'm proud of that. And I think what makes me ready to I'm excited and energized, but what makes me ready to go to D.C. is the notion that I've worked really hard with many great Tennesseans like Ned McWhirter, Doug Henry, Ron Ramsey, Lieutenant Governor McNally, and all the governors that I've worked with. Marsha Blackburn and I sat on the floor, Mark Green, Diane Black. So we've all worked together to put Tennessee on top. Those values and principles need to be taken to D.C. because D.C. needs a darn good dose of Tennessee. And I think the parallel between myself and Phil Rowe is very positive. I chaired the Joint Select Committee on Veterans Affairs for years, just like he did in D.C. I'm now on the Governor's Council for Armed Forces Veterans and their families. I chair the Health Committee. He's been working obviously to try to fix health care in our nation. And chairing the Health Committee, I chair the same committee that Lamar Alexander chairs in D.C. And so that back and forth that I've had between Tennessee and Washington, D.C. for all these years, I think the institutional knowledge, background, and experience that I've gained, makes me ready for Phil Rowe to hand me the ball, and I'll run with it. I'm energized.
All right, Rusty Crowe, thank you for coming in this morning.
We made it through, yeah.
I hope you have a good rest of your day. And